Rebecca G. Here I have her. Who I took a class with, and I think I'll just simply say I found it very interesting. And I'll talk to her about it in private. Rebecca G. teaches creative fiction and poetry workshops to high school students in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn. Through the nonprofit, the Writers Studio Kids Write. G has published poetry in several small presses, including the Madison Review. G's artwork fuses her poetry and narratives, sculpture, and moving images. She has received awards for this work, including an Arts Midwest, NEA Regional Visual Art Fellowship, and an Illinois Arts Council Visual Artist Fellowship. She is an MFA candidate at Bennington College in poetry and fiction. Rebecca G.
Wait to find out what Bert is going to tell me.
I know. I apologize.
No. Listen, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who organized this. I know Linda and Bert and anyone else who was involved, because it's so important to have spaces like this where we can hear poetry read aloud, because it just adds a dimension. I mean, we all love to read poetry on the page, but there's something really magical about hearing it read and having opportunities like this.
You better.
So thank you. So this first piece that I'm going to read, I guess I'll just give you a little bit of background. I'm a fifth-generation Texan, and I'm far from home. And sometimes this comes up in my work, and I'm trying to sort of negotiate that history. So this first piece is about my mother when she was a child. It's called West Texas. Imagine it. My mother was a child once. She tells me that she remembers her grandmother's farm in West Texas. The old stone farmhouse was built with 12-foot ceilings and a covered breezeway that bisected the home into two uneasy halves. In the summer, everyone slept with the wooden shutters open wide. Mother and her cousins had to use clothespins to hold their bedclothes down, and the sheets would ripple in the wind off the prairie like sails. This next piece is called The Good Wife. My father tells me that he is teaching me to be a good wife. As he demonstrates the way that he wishes me to kiss him, I look over his shoulder at the porcelain kissing angels that mock us. If my arms were long enough to reach their sleek golden heads, I would set them in motion, a frantic bobbling up and down, slowing bit by bit to the barest weak nod and then dead-on stillness. Mother does not allow me to touch the angels because I know what they do when at play, and I might break them. It is hard to be still. My skin feels stiff and frayed at the edges. Will Father cover me in plastic slip covers so that I stay good as chaste for my future husband? Don't be afraid to please, Father tells me, his hands the size of dinner plates, heavy as pewter. I stare at the plastic fruit in a bowl on the table at his elbow. At a distance, the fruit looks like perfection, but it is bitter and unyielding to the mouth. I know because I've tried to taste it. When I was growing up, we had this great house that had a natural pond in the back, and it was about 20 yards wide. It was great. There were all kinds of strange creatures in it, and this is about one of those creatures. It's called the eel. With its fins like tiny dragon wings, the freshwater eel massages the pond water through the slashes of its gills. I try to look at the fin and not the head of the thing that is all mouth and teeth reaching for the crust of bread in my trembling hand. The other girls, who are only here because it is my birthday and there will be cake and ice cream, have already fled screaming into my parents' house. But I am transfixed by the filmy eye of the eel and its familiar hunger. Its mouth as wide as my hand, its body that is both snake and fish, gray mud covering muscle and longer than my arm, which I already know because I have tried to measure the eel by enticing it across the pond surface with the bread that it wants. I've stretched my arm as far as I can without falling into the water. The body of the eel is longer than my reach. I imagine its lair, its dark hole in the murky water where it waits for food to fall into its mouth. Imagine myself beside the eel, my pale skin a white mollusk half hidden by a layer of mud. I watch the light filtering through the water and the schools of minnows that dance in synchronistic, jittery waves above my hiding place, the collective mass of their tiny bodies darkening the bright sky of water above the eel's open jaw. But then my father is behind me and he makes me drop the bread crust and go into the house to watch with the other girls behind the glass sliding door. Father stands at the end of the pond, his rubber waders half in the water and half out. He stands motionless, holding a hooked spear in his raised hand. The bunched muscles of his arm are tense and coiled like a copperhead waiting to strike. After it is over, and Father has speared the eel with a frog jabber, the girls and I tumble back outside to look at the monster in the grass. The eel is 2.5 feet long, large for a freshwater eel, and very old to be so large. My father tells me that the eel must have been there since the edges of the pond were filled in to make land for the house. And now I know that the eel has been living there, in the water, waiting and feasting long before I was born. So, this next piece is about art school and that experience, and it's called The Loss of Three Fingers. See, this is what happens to students who do not pay attention to the blade. Our teacher raised his left hand like a trophy, shook calloused thumb and index finger and 3 rooched stumps at the female students that he had gathered in a tight clump before the hulking table saw for this purpose, the boys smirking at our backs. Women dressed in drag, timberlands and plaid, we braided and tucked our shining hair under trucker caps, all of us desperate to prove that our gender was no barrier to cutting wood or making art. In other words, none of us flinched until later, when we were alone and the men were not around to taunt us. Bone and flesh and sex cut as finely as wood when put to the blade. Those missing fingers did more to make us cautious around blades and each other than all the hand-lettered signs posted by the woodshop foreman within sight of the saw's handle.
Wow.
This is a piece about my mother. She had a long illness and was in and out of a couple of nursing homes. And this describes one of those visits. She ended up being able to come home, which was a really wonderful experience. But in this poem, we weren't sure that was going to happen. It's called The Happy Bear Dance. The nurse's aides are changing Mother's bedding, rolling her gently from side to side to release the soiled sheets. They talk to her, coaxing her to lift one thin limb and then another one, but Mother's eyes are focused on some distant point. One of the aides tries to capture her attention, promising to do the Happy Bear Dance for her if she will smile. She looks at the aide finally, and I see the ghost of Mother's smile and the tiny spark of mirth that spreads from her eyes to the left side of her mouth. The aide laughs in response and rolls her ample hips in a surprisingly agile, swooping dance around Mother's hydraulic bed. Mother smiles openly now, animated through the rest of their morning rituals. The aides leave her propped in the armchair by the window. Mother blinks in the bright light. I pull my heavy chair closer and lean into her sour breath, eager like a child again. There's so many things that I forgot to ask her. So many things, so many words we never said. Secrets and stories we never shared. My shadow blocks the sunlight on Mother's face. I lean in, but there's no response or flicker of recognition in her eyes. I do not know how to do the Happy Bear Dance. We sit together as the room settles like a blanket. All quarters in this nursing home lead to the central dining hall. There's noise and mayhem as the residents gather for breakfast. The talking dies quickly as hot food is dispensed. Mother does not seem to notice the deepening quiet with a distant clink of metal to plate. Her ears are attuned to the quiet whirring of a machine connected to her feeding tube. The shushing sound it makes reminds her of something. If only I would leave her alone so that she can remember. I am the one who holds on to the present like an invisible tether that restrains without cutting her papery skin. I can hear the aides talk and joke quietly between them as they strip the adjacent room of linens, removing the personal trinkets and wilting plants of the former occupant. The aides purify the room with light and powerful solvents until the linoleum floor is blinding in the morning light, and all traces of the departed are gone. This one is called Mothers Sell Their Daughters. It was in the time when mothers sold their daughters, pale and luminous as oysters, half-shelled and vigilant, briny with unshed tears. But what else is a mother to do with all that treasures of beauty and brittleness? In this piece, Bert mentioned that I'm also an artist and I incorporate my poetry in my work. I've been doing that for 10 years. And this piece originally started out as an art piece, a concrete poem that was incorporated into a viewing box. And I've been working on it, it's sort of taken on another life, and let's see where it goes. It's called Fire is the Mother and the Father. Fire is the mother and the father, two dry sticks rubbed together until they catch flame. We are the progeny that stoke the wretched fire so that it burns and burns endlessly. We are the fire that yearns to consume our days, looking inward, looking backward, each in our own way. Fire is the sister who left and is forever reminding us that she has left and will never come back, never forgive, forget, fulfill our hopes and harrowings. How like a little sister to rub salt into the open wound. She grows more like mother, father with each gesture, each beloved whiplash of a knuckle to the forehead, forging, shaping, pressing her into the shallow trough of all that she renounces. She blames and blames the forebear she hates, doomed to make most, if not all, the same righteous mistakes. Fire is the glum brother, burdened by the sins of the father, afraid to love, afraid to touch his own child, fearful that she will combust into kindling, crackling candelabra of carelessness, oily and as troublesome as the hurricane lamp under the sink, sinking into the sin, thinking too much. He goes against the grain and the strain of the ruffled sundress the child has overgrown overnight. He knows about betrayal. He is a badger in a bear trap, not made for him. But he embraces the pain anyway, gnawing at the sight of injury, blinded by agony. He refuses to be like him. No, not at all like him. This is his mantra. Fire is the eldest who is absent even as she is present. See, touch her, kick her godhead. I promise that she will not feel a thing. Catch her if you can and make her scream to be so alive. Fire is the destroyer and the redeemer, cleansing, clearing the scrub brush, the unseen, unforgiven undergrowth, accretion of shit and garbage and dead weight of things and bodies left behind, skins shed but not discarded, sorrow celebrated, venerated into victimhood, sainthood, the hood of our discontent. We love our loss that weighs on us like stones in the pockets of a dying woman swimming with or against the current crisis, the call of the blessed future that is always just beyond our reach. Our ragged fingertips claw at the banks of the river, tree limbs, freebies, the promise of easy credit, and all manner of delicious things to eat that promise never to make us fleshy. Soon we will not be able to breathe if I do not give all this a proper English burial. Or better still, bind the dead feeling with a winding sheet, feed it to the fire to become the Swedish remains on my tongue. All right, I'm getting a little dry here. This poem is called A Squirrel for Everything. Your velvet breath, your raspy whiskers. Then you whisper in my ear, you think too much. So true that your words blow a tiny hole in my happy left ventricle. But I laugh into the white teeth of your smile, and together we push against the pile of books at the end of the bed with our bare feet until they tumble to the hard floor. In the dream that I had after you left in the night, I was standing in the park, the one that I walk through every day. I tried to walk quickly because I was late. I'm always late in my dreams. But in this particular nightmare, I could not breathe and I could not run, because in every direction that I turned, there was a quick, sharp squirrel for everything. Continuing along that theme, sweeping you out of the house. I am sweeping you out of the house. Your dead skin, a button from your favorite shirt, an old poster rolled like a spyglass. The bottom dresser drawer that I emptied to make way for your clothes and other things is empty again. I find one of your dreadlocks, frayed at the end, beneath my grandmother's rocking chair, your favorite retreat in my house where you used to perch on the edge of the unsteady rocker, gesturing passionately as you read a new poem to me. I add the dreadlock to the pyre I've made in a rusty copper urn in the garden. It joins your handwritten notes and whimsical, vaguely obscene drawings, scraps of delinquent bills, the deserted button, letters that I have never sent. The dreadlock sputters at first, then catches flame, impressing its brilliance onto my vision like a burning finger against a clay wall. My 10,000 faults. My 10,000 faults settle like clods of dirt onto my chest until the lungs collapse and the fine line of my clavicle snaps like a wet twig, broken but not cleanly. And this one's called Sleeping on Couches. I sleep on couches. Some couches are made into beds that are almost comfortable if you lay the foam down. Some couches are short, and I sleep in a fetal position. My favorite couch, and the only one that belongs to me, is long and wide enough for me to stretch my legs out however I please. My job involves sleeping on a short couch next to an elderly woman who may not survive the night. One night as I listened to her moaning in her sleep, I remembered my mother as she lay dying on the family sofa. My mother began sleeping on the couch when I was a teenager, which means that she slept on the couch for 30 years, give or take a few, while my father slept alone in a king-sized bed. After he departed, she refused to sleep anywhere else because she had grown to love her place on the couch, with its grooves and lumps that fit her swollen body, and she could no longer imagine finding comfort anywhere else. The last two that I'll read to you are two haiku. I love haiku. It's such a great form, and I had fun with this. This first one is called I Run From You. I run from you, slip blue violets between tongue and softened palate. And the last one is called I Don't Run From You. Your breath, your trace, a snail's path over hot pavement. I don't run from you.